decayed, you could tell. This is the truth. When we went from one room to the next, we had to unscrew the light bulb and carry it to the next room and screw it into the socket there so we had light. It did have a shower down there, and it is the first time I ever saw a shower that was green carpet. And then my wife secreted in a quart of bleach because, you ready for this? This guy had a conviction against soap. And she smuggled in a quart of bleach and put it on the green carpet and found out that it was really blue tile. And that's what had grown on this all those years. Whoa, wait a second. Hadn't been divorced. That's all that matters. That's all that matters to some of you and me. But it's not all that matters to God, and He's not qualified for the ministry. I can show you guys who have never been divorced, and their children are not in subjection to them. Same book, isn't it? Now, I know what you're going to say. Oh, wait a minute, preacher, wait a minute. Now, if what you're saying is true, then nobody's qualified. Well, that might be the case. I don't know. But definitely, I know what the next thing is. Well, you must preach for preachers that you think shouldn't be in the ministry. You're right. I do. Why? I need the money. Nope. Get this. I have the right to judge. I have the right to think a man should not be in the ministry. I do not have the right to try to get him out of it. That's condemnation. When you decide you're going to shut somebody's ministry down, when you decide you're going to get on the telephone for whatever reason, and you're going to hurt somebody because you're going to spread a prayer request, that is condemnation. And you know why we do it? We do it because God won't. Let me ask you a question. Here's how I look at this. I know it's a novel thing, but I go to the Bible. You read that book, and in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 1, it says, Saul reigned 1 year when he'd reigned 2 years over Israel. In 1 Samuel chapter 13, Saul has been king over Israel for 2 years. You get to verse 8. He's been waiting for a guy named Samuel who is late. Typical. He's waiting for this guy named Samuel to come and make an offering, and the guy named Samuel doesn't show. So he goes and makes the offering himself, makes a burnt offering. He's going to make a burnt offering and a peace offering, gets the burnt offering, doesn't even get to the peace offering. Samuel shows up. You know what Samuel says? Your kingdom will not continue. You're fired. Right? 2 years in, he got canned and sat on the throne for 38 more years. That would be like you going to work tomorrow and your boss says, you're fired. Well, okay. So, well, wait a minute. You're working on that project. Will you be done by the end of this week? Yeah, well, okay, you can finish the project. So you finish the project, and Saturday comes or Friday comes. He says, well, look, you're fired, but show up Monday. I got one little thing I want you to do. And you show up Monday. And Monday night comes, and he says, now, look, you're canned, okay? But look, there's something I want you to take a look at tomorrow. Just show up. And that goes on for 38 years. You get the watch and the party. Now think about this. Think of someone who you think should not be in the ministry, who is not qualified to be in the ministry. Think of somebody else. Anyway, the person you think, and there's a bunch of them that I think shouldn't be in the ministry, okay? And I do preach for them. Yes, I do. The person you think that should not be in the ministry, God may agree with you and may have fired them 18 years ago, and they still got another 20 behind the pulpit before he pulls the plug. Who are you to pull the plug for him? The second one I use is Acts chapter 12. That's where Herod gets up. He gives a speech, and God didn't like the way that turned out. And before sundown, Herod is dead. Right? All right. Try thinking. The person who you think should not be in the ministry. Could God not have killed them by this time yesterday? How about last week? How about last year? Then if God didn't kill them, who do you think you are to kill them? He said, condemn not. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So, now I know what you're going to say. Okay, I won't try to hurt him, but when I'm talking to people and his name comes up, I'm going to tell him about, because you're trying to condemn. There are guys that I don't like. There are guys that I think should not be in the ministry. There are guys that I know things about them that probably would break fellowship with the person I'm talking to if I told them. And when they mention their name, I don't say a thing. In fact, I have taught myself to find something good about them, because if I don't have something good to say about them, I'm going to say something bad. And I'm going to justify myself because of whatever this guy is guilty of, and so I'm going to rip his throat out, and then when it all falls, I'll say, all I said was the truth. And all we leave is smoldering craters behind us. You can think I don't belong in the ministry. It doesn't bother me. And you know when I'm going to be out? As soon as God wants me out. As soon as He does. Now, don't worry, I've not been divorced. But I'm sure in them other 21, I'll bet you can find something. Man, how about this one? How about just take blameless? I'll bet you I could put just about every preacher in the country out over blameless, just walk through his neighborhood or walk through town, and there'd be somebody who said, well, my kid doesn't go to church anymore because he made him mad. See, blame. He's been blamed. He's out. Condemn not. You have the right to think somebody is wrong. You do not have the right to carry out God's judgment. When you condemn, here's what you are. You think you are God. You are going to write out the sentence and carry it out. And the reason you're going to carry it out, you know why you're going to carry it out? Because God isn't. Look, here's how this works. Now watch the silence. I hate to say this. Watch the silence. Are you people right with God tonight? Doesn't that scare you? Not one person could say they were. But that's not because you don't think you're right with God. You think you're right with God, and you think if you said yes to that, then that'd be proud, then you wouldn't be right with God. I know how you work. Let me tell you something, guys. I am right with God tonight. I am right with God because I don't care what a sermon is. I don't care about anything like that. I believe this. Before I step behind this pulpit, I had flat better have my sins confessed and be right with God. I could have the message that God once preached, but if I have unconfessed sin, I don't belong behind the pulpit that night to preach it. So before I get behind the pulpit, I confess my sins, clean up my act. I want to get behind here and be right with God. So maybe none of you are right with God, but let me explain. I am. Now, I'm right with God. Now imagine this. Your pastor and I have a disagreement, and he refuses to admit that I'm right. Because of course I'm right. I'm always right. Aren't you always right? Of course you are. Now, look at the math. I am right with God. Your pastor disagrees with me. Then how could your pastor disagree with me and be what? And he refuses to get right with God, meaning agree with me. Since he now refuses to get right with God, you and I both know what's going to happen. God is going to judge him. So, because he's not right with God. Agree with me. Now, God's going to judge him, but you see, here's what I'm afraid of. I'd hate to think that some of you had your family in this church building the day God judges him, and the roof caves in, and I didn't try to warn you of God's coming judgment on your pastor. And so I just start calling you one by one and go, I love Brother Carlson, but there's just some problems there. I used to think that he was a good man, but there's just some things there I wouldn't dare say. And one by one, a family leaves and an individual leaves, and every time somebody goes out the door, you know what I say? Look how God's judging him. No, that ain't God. That's me. And I am telling you, that wicked animal lives in the heart of every single person sitting in this room. We will get on that telephone and we will send anonymous letters, and we will say, well, if you have him if you have fellowship with him, then I'm not having fellowship with you. I had some preacher one time, he asked me where I was going. I told him where I was going to preach for this guy. He goes, you preach for him? I said, yes. Why? I said, you want to know why? This guy's, they're in close proximity. I said, get a map. I said, draw a circle 50 miles around your church and his. And I said, outside that circle, nobody even knows you exist, and you're going to tell me who I want to preach for. The guy's going to, if you preach for him, then I'm not going to have fellowship with you. Thank you very much. Then I'm probably going to have good fellowship with somebody else. Condemn not. Look what it says. This is kind of a scary thing. Verse 37, judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and it shall be forgiven. Did we just get an inference? Forgive and you get forgiven. Don't forgive and you don't get forgiven. Oh, we're not talking about salvation, guys. We're not talking about salvation. But everybody here has been wronged by somebody, haven't you? Surely you have been. Look, if you're here tonight and you say, no, No one's ever done me wrong. See me after church.